Hello, welcome to this presentation. Today we're going to talk about sketching out your protagonist, which is your hero, and your antagonist, which is your villain. So a protagonist, in a lot of cases it's the heroic character, but really it's whoever you're really supposed to focus on in the story. Who are your readers supposed to be rooting for? This doesn't mean that it's the perfect person, but it's the person through whose eyes we see the story and the person we should know the most about. We need to make this person interesting, and as interesting as possible. Interesting doesn't always mean as good or as righteous as possible, but interesting. No one really wants to read about people who are just kind of weak and don't do anything. One rule is to make your protagonist proactive as often as possible, which means they go out and cause change. They go out and try to do things to solve their problems instead of just sitting around waiting for something to happen to them. We call that being passive. So a protagonist is proactive. For the story to progress, they need to have some sort of goal or desire that is being impeded. In most cases, there has to be a goal so that there can be some sort of conflict. And usually the protagonist, you want to think about your age group when selecting a protagonist. The convention these days is to have them just a little bit older than your target audience. So if you're writing, say you're writing for 14-year-old boys, that maybe you've got a 16-year-old boy who is your protagonist. If you're writing for 18-year-old girls, you might want to have someone who's a 19-year-old girl. Someone just a slightly older, but not too much older. That just seems to be the way things are going these days. Most of the time, you're not going to want to write what's called a white knight. These are people that do not have flaws, that they simply rush in and are always saving the day. For example, Superman is a bit of a white knight. He does not really have that many flaws. Really, the only flaw he has is that kryptonite can hurt him, and that's not really a character flaw. That's just a matter of reality. Real people have flaws, even good people, so should your protagonists. You don't want them to be so flawed that the readers can't sympathize with him or her. They have to be able to put themselves... your readers have to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the protagonist, at least at some point. We want them to be relatable, so don't make them so nasty and mean and flawed that just can't even see their point of view. But there should be some. And also, another problem with having a white knight is there's no room for progression or growth throughout the story. It's very satisfying to see the main character grow or learn something, become something better than what he or she was before. And so, if you have someone who's already perfect at the beginning, there's nowhere to grow. There are a lot of things to consider, and a lot of different ways to sketch these out. Sometimes I just make a checklist and have all these different things and write them about my characters. Sometimes I've heard people do interviews with their characters, write some sample scenes with them, do some writing practices with them. But think about their appearance, their age, their nationality, their spiritual beliefs, their religion. Not just their religion, but what do they believe spiritually that goes even beyond maybe what their religion teaches. Likes and dislikes, family and friends, major life events, things that you might want to reveal at some time during the story that might make this character the way they are. For example, if they had someone die at a very young age close to them, they might be more reserved and more less likely to take risks. As say they watched their grandmother die in a car crash or something like that. More things to consider. How do they talk? You need to make your characters sound different from each other. Then a lot of that will depend on where they're from, what their education level is, just a lot of their interests. Would they use certain kinds of jargon for different professions? So a pilot's going to talk different than an artist or a dancer or just whatever. Education, talents, and weaknesses, goals and wishes, fears, things that their villain might want to exploit. Just anything that you might consider important in their backstory or their appearance or their personality. So since your protagonist is so important to your story, you're going to want to have the most details about him or her so that you can use those as the story progresses. And the more detail you give about someone, that's kind of the signal to the reader, hey, pay attention, this person is important, because I'm giving a lot of detail about them. One way to do keep track of everything is the character Bible. Some people either open a file on their computer or I'll use an actual notebook and say make an entry for each character. This is my protagonist, and here's all the things you need to know about him or her. And then you can go and refer to that later. Say, oh, I can't remember whether Susie had blue eyes or brown eyes. You go back, oh, look there. Or where did I have this person coming from? Or what happened in his or her life that would, how would they react to this situation that I've thrown them in? All of these are important things that can be referenced if you make a character Bible. So your antagonist is going to antagonize. Whatever the goal of the protagonist is, the antagonist usually has a goal that is mutually exclusive. They can't both get what they want, and that makes the tension. For example, if you're writing a romance story, there's one girl and two suitors. They both would like to be with her, but only one of them can get what they want. If it's The Lord of the Rings, for example, Frodo wants to destroy the ring, and Sauron wants to have the ring to gain all of his powers back and take over Middle-earth. Those two things both can't happen. The best antagonists have a logical point of view. You can see how they got there. They can see how these antagonists actually think that they are the protagonists. They think they're doing the right thing and the other person is evil. If you let them explain that a little bit, that's more interesting than saying, I'm the Dark Lord of Evil and I'm evil because I'm evil. Another way to make your antagonists a little bit more interesting is if they're not all bad. They do have some redeeming qualities. You want to try to make them as well-rounded or even more than your protagonist. Make them somebody they might have been able to do good things if things had gone differently. I like to think of in Star Wars, if you think of the character Anakin Skywalker who turns into Darth Vader. If he had just been a little bit different, things had gone a little bit differently, he could have been one of the good guys all the way through, but instead he became the Dark Lord and did a lot of bad stuff, though that eventually redeemed himself in the end. For some other things, for like normal people though, you can show that maybe this guy's a bad guy and he's trying to get revenge on somebody who made fun of him in high school, but he's really nice to his family, and he's got a pet dog that he takes good care of, and he likes to raise geraniums or something. Just something to humanize him or her, and to show that there's good and evil qualities in all people. It just depends on which side you give more energy and time to, whether you are a villain or a hero. So many stories, when you're wrapping it up, the protagonist gets everything they want at the end. The hero triumphs, they live happily ever after. A lot of the fairy tale based stories, that's just what happens. Very few stories, though, have the villain getting everything that he or she wants at the end. They would be very unsatisfying unless they were just a really, really good situation, whether maybe it's a story where the villain is the main character and you're rooting for the villain. I don't know. Some stories, though, which tend to be a little bit more satisfying, it's a little more realistic. Have the protagonist gain some things, the antagonist win some points, but in the end there's a price that's paid for victory. Once again, Lord of the Rings is a good example of this. Yes, in the end, they do destroy the ring, but it leaves Frodo, the protagonist, scarred. He's not the same person, and it's not a good way either. He has to leave Middle Earth just because he just can't take it, living like he lived before. A lot of people died along the way. A lot of the heroes fell in these battles, and so they did win, but there was a steep price that was paid, and so it was kind of a not an all white victory, not all black victory, but a gray area in between.